I wasn't looking for another woman. That's the truth. I was looking for a fortress, a hermitage, a six-sided box where I could lick my wounds in peace. When I checked the box for a random roommate assignment, I was actively choosing anonymity. I pictured someone I could ignore, a ghost who paid her half of the rent and left no psychic residue. I had just spent 2 years memorizing the emotional landscape of another person, another woman, only to have her redraw the map and leave me stranded in uncharted territory. My heart was a shattered compass, and I had no interest in finding a new true north. I just wanted to be still. The room itself was a study in beige mediocrity, smelling faintly of old paint, and the lemon-scented cleaner the university used to erase the sins of the previous occupants. A stark line of masking tape, a joke left over from orientation week, still ran down the center of the warped linoleum floor. My side was Spartan, a neatly made bed, a stack of textbooks, a single-framed photo of a coastline I'd never visited, turned to face the wall. Her side, Maya's side, was a controlled explosion of life. Plants with names I didn't know trailed green tendrils from her windowsill. Books were stacked not just by subject but by the color of their spines, creating a soft rainbow against the cinder block. There was a warmth emanating from her half of the room, a low hum of contentment that felt like an accusation against my own stark silence. We'd been living together for 3 weeks, coexisting with the polite, sterile distance of strangers on a long train ride. Then came the night of the game. It wasn't my idea. Our suite-mates, loud and perpetually cheerful, had descended upon our room with a cheap bottle of vodka and a thirst for manufactured bonding. "Come on," one of them, Jess, had pleaded. "Just one game of truth or dare. It's a freshman rite of passage." I wanted to say no, to retreat behind my headphones and my wall of existential dread, but Maya had looked over at me, her expression unreadable but somehow expectant, and I'd found myself nodding. A mistake. It was always a mistake to let people in, even a crack. The game was as banal as I'd expected. Inane truths about high school crushes and embarrassing childhood moments. Stupid dares involving prank calls and eating spoonfuls of hot sauce. I opted for truth every time, offering up carefully curated, harmless facts that revealed nothing. I was a fortress and my gates were sealed. Then, Jess, flushed with cheap liquor and a sense of power, spun the empty bottle. It landed, inevitably, on me. Her eyes gleamed. "Truth or dare, Chloe?" "Truth," I said, my voice flat. "Boring," she sang. "I dare you to sit in Maya's lap for the next 3 rounds." The air in the room went still. It was a stupid, childish dare, meant to create a flicker of awkwardness and nothing more. But for me, it felt like a seismic event. My carefully constructed wall of indifference was about to be breached by force. I looked at Maya. She wasn't laughing like the others. Her dark eyes were steady on mine, and she gave a small, almost imperceptible shrug, a gesture of quiet allowance. There was no escape. My pride wouldn't let me back down. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Slowly, I stood up, the rough carpet scratching my bare ankles. I crossed the masking tape line, a trespasser entering foreign territory. The scent of her side of the room was stronger here, sandalwood from an incense stick burned hours ago, the clean, earthy smell of her plants, and something else, something uniquely her. It smelled like chamomile and old paper. I turned and lowered myself onto her lap. It was awful. It was exquisite. My body was rigid, a statue of mortification. She was warm, solid beneath me. Her legs were crossed, and I was perched awkwardly, trying to make myself as small and weightless as possible. I could feel the soft cotton of her jeans through my own leggings. Her arm came around my waist, a light, hesitant touch meant only to steady me, but it sent a jolt through my system like a live wire. I stared fixedly at a crack in the ceiling, willing myself to dissociate, to go somewhere else. But my senses were in revolt, betraying me at every turn. I was acutely aware of the rhythm of her breathing, the way her chest rose and fell against my back. Her hair, which was usually tied up, was down, and a single dark curl brushed against my neck. I fought the urge to shiver. My brain screamed at me, "This is nothing, it's a joke, it doesn't mean anything," but my body was telling a different story. It was remembering what it felt like to be close to a woman, the specific way softness and strength could coexist in one form. It was a feeling I had sworn off, a language I had promised myself I would forget. And here it was, being whispered against my skin without my consent. 3 rounds. I counted every second, every breath. When it was finally over, I scrambled off her lap so quickly I nearly tripped, mumbling an excuse about needing water and fleeing to the communal kitchen. I leaned against the cool countertop, breathing hard, my hands shaking. It was just a stupid game. But as I stood there, under the unforgiving fluorescent lights, I knew that a line had been crossed, and it wasn't the one made of masking tape on our floor. The game ended, but the room remained. That was the problem. There was no escape. The 80 square feet we shared became a stage for a play I hadn't agreed to be in. Before the dare, Maya had been a feature of the room, like the radiator that clanked or the window that wouldn't quite close. Now, she was the room. My awareness of her was a constant, low-grade hum beneath the surface of my thoughts. I started noticing things, tiny details that lodged in my brain like splinters. She had a small, silver ring on her thumb, and she would twist it when she was concentrating on a reading, her brow furrowed in a way that was both serious and endearing. She hummed when she studied, not a real tune, just a soft, melodic sound deep in her throat that vibrated through the quiet space. It should have been annoying. It wasn't. I became an unwilling scholar of her habits. I learned that she drank her coffee black, that she fell asleep with a book on her chest nearly every night, and that she always made her bed the moment she got out of it, pulling the quilt taut with sharp, efficient movements. I memorized the scent of her shampoo, a mix of citrus and something deep and woodsy that lingered in the air after her morning shower. Sometimes, when she was out, I would find myself inhaling deeply, trying to catch the faint trace of it, then immediately feel a hot flush of shame. This was what Sarah had done to me. She had rewired my brain to find danger in intimacy, to see the smallest sign of connection as a precursor to pain. I was supposed to be healing, building my fortress stronger. Instead, I was cataloging the daily rituals of my roommate with the obsessive focus of a lovelorn teenager. We developed a careful choreography to navigate the cramped space. A dance of polite murmurs and averted eyes. Sorry, as we brushed past each other in the narrow gap between our desks. Excuse me, as one of us needed to get to the closet. These accidental points of contact became charged events. A fleeting brush of her arm against mine would send a prickle of electricity across my skin, leaving an echo long after she'd moved away. I started wearing sweaters even when it was warm, adding a layer of wool between my skin and the possibility of her touch. I was terrified of what I was feeling, this slow, creeping thaw in a part of myself I had declared a permanent winter. The fear was a cold knot in my stomach. I knew how this story went. It started with noticing, with the dangerous accumulation of lovely little details. It progressed to caring. And it ended with a spectacular, gut-wrenching implosion that left me sweeping up the pieces of myself for months. I wouldn't do it again. I couldn't. So I retreated further. I put my headphones on as soon as I entered the room. I took my meals in the library. I constructed a wall of silence, hoping it would be enough to starve whatever this fragile, terrifying thing was before it could take root. One Tuesday night, the wall cracked. A brutal philosophy paper was due the next morning, and I was drowning in Kant's categorical imperative. The words on the page had begun to swim, blurring into an incomprehensible soup of deontological ethics. I'd been staring at the same sentence for 20 minutes, my caffeine-fueled anxiety cresting into a wave of pure panic. I dropped my head into my hands, the rough texture of my palms a small, grounding pain against my forehead. The silence in the room stretched, thick and heavy, broken only by the frantic scratching of my pen, and the soft rustle of Maya turning a page. I thought she was oblivious, lost in her own world of sociological theory. Then, a shadow fell over my desk. I looked up. Maya was standing there, holding a steaming mug in both hands. "You look like you're about to have an aneurysm," she said. Her voice was low, laced with a gentle, wry humor. I made tea. She placed the mug on a coaster next to my laptop. It was chamomile, the scent rising in a warm, fragrant cloud. My favorite. How did she know it was my favorite? I'd only bought the box a week ago. She must have seen it. She must have noticed. The thought sent a fresh wave of something, not panic but a strange, warm flutter, through my chest. "You didn't have to do that," I mumbled, my voice rough. I know. She didn't move away. She just stood there, her presence a quiet weight in the room. Kant's a beast. I had that class last year. Nearly threw my textbook out the window. I managed a weak smile. I'm about 5 minutes away from that myself. Don't, she said, a small smile playing on her own lips. It's a rental. They charge you for that. The joke was simple, not particularly clever, but it broke the tension. I laughed, a real laugh that felt rusty from disuse. I picked up the mug, the ceramic warm against my cold fingers. The warmth seeped into my skin, a direct counteragent to the icy anxiety in my veins. We stood in silence for a moment, and for the first time, it wasn't awkward. It was comfortable. It's just a lot, I finally said, surprising myself. The words came out before I could stop them. This whole semester. It feels like I'm constantly behind. It was a half-truth, a safe stand-in for the real, crushing weight I was carrying. She nodded, her expression softening with an empathy that felt startlingly genuine. I get it. It feels like you're running a race you didn't know you'd signed up for. She leaned a hip against my desk, crossing her arms. Sometimes you just have to stop and drink the tea. I looked from her face to the mug in my hands. It was such a small gesture. A cup of tea. A moment of shared commiseration. But it felt monumental. It was the first crack of light in my self-imposed darkness. For months, I had been telling myself that I needed to be an island, that vulnerability was a liability I couldn't afford. But in that moment, with the warm steam of chamomile rising between us, Maya's quiet act of kindness felt less like a threat and more like a lifeline. I took a sip of the tea. It was perfect. And as I drank it, I felt a small, traitorous piece of my fortress crumble into dust. A few nights later, the roles were reversed. I came back from a late class to find Maya hunched over her laptop, her face illuminated by the cold blue light of the screen. Her thumb ring was getting a workout, twisting and turning relentlessly. There was a tension in her shoulders I recognized. It was the posture of someone fighting a losing battle against a deadline or, worse, their own self-doubt. The tea incident had shifted something between us, lowering the drawbridge just enough for small kindnesses to pass back and forth. I found myself walking to our tiny kitchenette, filling the electric kettle without a second thought. I made 2 mugs this time, setting one down on her desk just as she had done for me. She looked up, startled, her eyes wide and tired. I figured you could use one, I said, trying to sound casual. A slow smile spread across her face, transforming her weary features. You're a lifesaver. Thank you, she took a grateful sip. It's my parents, she admitted, her voice quiet. They're a lot. I leaned against the doorframe, a safe distance away, but still within the circle of her confession. In what way? She sighed, running a hand through her dark hair. They're amazing people. Really? They sacrificed everything to come here, to give me and my brother a better life. And because of that, there's this pressure. It's unspoken, but it's always there. The need to be perfect, to succeed, to make it all worth it. My dad wants me to go to law school. Do you want to go to law school? She laughed, a short, humorless sound. God, no. I want to work for a nonprofit. Maybe do international aid work. Something that actually helps people, you know. Not just argue about contracts. She looked down at her hands, wrapped around the warm mug. I haven't told them yet. I feel like I'd be letting them down. Disappointing them after everything they've done. My own family issues, my sister's constant, well-meaning but suffocating judgment, felt trivial in comparison. Here was a real, tangible weight, and she was sharing it with me. The act of reciprocity was a powerful thing. She had seen my small academic stress, and met it with kindness. Now, I was seeing a piece of her real, hidden struggle, and I felt an unexpected surge of protectiveness. It's your life, Maya, I said softly. You're the one who has to live it. They'll understand. Or, if they don't, they'll have to learn to. She looked up at me, and there was a sheen of unshed tears in her eyes. You think so? I do, I said, with more conviction than I felt. We sat there for a long time, sipping our tea in a silence that was now filled with shared secrets. The masking tape on the floor seemed absurd, a relic from a time when we were strangers. The room was no longer divided into his and hers. It was becoming ours. The trust she had placed in me was a fragile, precious thing. She had offered me a glimpse behind her own calm, steady facade, and in doing so, had made it feel safe for me to consider peeking out from behind mine. Sarah had used my vulnerabilities as weapons, turning my own confessions against me in the end. Maya, it seemed, was different. She handled them with care, as if they were something to be protected. The thought was terrifying. And hopeful. And I couldn't tell which emotion was stronger. The shift was undeniable after that night. The careful choreography of avoidance was replaced by a new, tentative rhythm of connection. We started leaving the door to our room propped open, an invitation to the other suite-mates, but really, an invitation to each other. We'd fall into easy conversations while brushing our teeth at the communal sinks, our reflections standing side by side in the mirror. We discovered a shared love for a cheesy sci-fi show from the 90s and spent a rainy Saturday binge-watching it on her laptop, huddled together on her bed with a bowl of popcorn between us. It was during that marathon that it happened. The turn. The moment where the low hum of awareness crescendoed into an unignorable chord. We were on the last episode of the season. The hero was making a noble sacrifice, and the score swelled with dramatic strings. It was ridiculously over the top, and I let out a small, sarcastic laugh. At the same moment, Maya reached for a handful of popcorn. My hand was already in the bowl. Our fingers brushed. It was nothing, a flicker of contact, skin on skin. But then, her fingers curled slightly, a gentle pressure against mine, and she didn't pull away. Neither did I. The world seemed to slow down. The sound from the laptop faded into a dull drone. All I could feel was the warmth of her hand, the slight roughness of a callus on her index finger, the impossibly soft skin of her palm against my knuckles. We stayed like that for a full 10 seconds, our hands intertwined in a bowl of half-eaten popcorn. My breath hitched in my throat. I lifted my eyes from our joined hands to her face. She was already looking at me. Her dark eyes weren't just looking, they were searching. There was a question in them, a vulnerability that mirrored my own. The air between us grew thick, heavy with everything unsaid. I could see the faint pulse in her neck, feel the heat radiating from her skin. My entire being was screaming at me to pull away, to make a joke, to shatter the intensity of the moment before it shattered me. But I was paralyzed. I wanted this. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I wanted to lean in. I wanted to know what her lips tasted like. I wanted to close the small, torturous distance between us. The moment stretched, taut and shimmering, like a soap bubble about to burst. Then, the laptop battery died. The screen went black, plunging the room into the dim, gray light of the rainy afternoon. The spell was broken. We both pulled our hands back at the same time, the sudden absence of her touch feeling like a loss. I'll probably find the charger, she said, her voice a little breathless. Yeah, I croaked, my own voice unrecognizable. Good idea. She scrambled off the bed, busying herself with untangling the cord from her bag. I stayed where I was, my heart pounding a frantic, wild rhythm against my ribs. It was no longer a question. It was no longer a vague, deniable feeling. It was a fact, solid and terrifying and exhilarating. I was attracted to my roommate. Deeply, irrevocably attracted to her. And judging by the way she couldn't quite meet my eyes as she plugged the laptop in, the feeling was mutual. The fortress was in ruins. The winter was over. And I had no idea what to do with the vulnerable, green shoot of hope that was pushing its way through the frozen ground. After the moment with the popcorn bowl, the tension in our small room became a third occupant. It was a living, breathing thing that took up space, and made the air feel thin. Every casual glance was charged, every accidental touch was a small explosion. We were orbiting each other in a tightening spiral, the gravitational pull between us growing stronger with each rotation. My internal monologue became a relentless loop of her name. Maya. 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 I saw her everywhere, even when she wasn't there. I'd be in the library, and catch the scent of sandalwood and think of her. I'd see a girl with dark, curly hair from behind, and my heart would leap, only to fall when she turned and it wasn't Maya. I was losing my mind. The fear was still there, a cold, familiar companion. It whispered warnings in my ear, reminding me of Sarah, of the pain, of the promises I'd made to myself. Don't be a fool, it would hiss. You know how this ends. But for the first time, another voice was starting to push back. A quieter, more hopeful voice that sounded a lot like Maya's. It spoke of kindness, of shared laughter, of the comforting weight of her presence. The two voices were at war within me, and the battlefield was my own exhausted heart. I tried to pull back, to rebuild my walls, but it was like trying to build a sandcastle against a rising tide. One night, I was on the phone with my sister, who had a unique talent for making me feel like I was 12 years old and failing a math test. "You just sound different, Chloe," she'd said, her voice laced with suspicion. "Are you actually making friends? Are you going out?" "I'm fine, Jen," I said, pinching the bridge of my nose. Maya was at her desk, pretending to read, but I knew she was listening. "Because you know, after what happened with Sarah, Mom and I were just so worried you'd just lock yourself away. Maybe you should try dating again. Find a nice, stable guy." The words hung in the air, ugly and obtuse. A nice, stable guy. The casual erasure of my identity, of my past, of the very real love and very real heartbreak I had experienced, was a familiar sting. "I have to go," I said, my voice tight. "I have to study." I hung up before she could reply, tossing my phone onto my bed with more force than necessary. A moment later, Maya spoke, her voice soft. "You okay?" I shook my head, not trusting myself to speak. A hot, angry tear slid down my cheek. I was so tired of fighting. Fighting my sister's expectations, fighting my past, fighting this overwhelming, terrifying thing I felt for the woman sitting 5 feet away from me. Maya stood up and walked over to my side of the room, crossing the invisible line without hesitation. She didn't say anything. She just sat on the edge of my bed and placed her hand on my knee. Her touch was warm, steady, and utterly grounding. It wasn't a dare this time. It was a choice. And it undid me completely. The dam broke. The sob that escaped my throat was a raw, ragged thing I'd been holding back for months. All the pain from Sarah, the loneliness, the fear, it all came pouring out. And Maya just sat there, her hand a firm, comforting pressure on my knee, and let me cry. She didn't offer platitudes or try to fix it. She just bore witness to my breaking, her quiet presence a sanctuary. When the tears finally subsided, I was left feeling hollowed out and strangely calm. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, feeling embarrassed. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "Don't be," she said, her voice a low murmur. "You have nothing to be sorry for." She squeezed my knee gently. "My hand is falling asleep, though." I let out a wet, hiccuping laugh, the sound startling in the quiet room. "Oh. Sorry." I shifted, and her hand fell away, but she didn't move back to her desk. She stayed on my bed, her shoulder almost touching mine. "Chloe," she said, her voice barely audible. My name on her lips was a revelation. She rarely used it. It was always a nod, a smile, a quiet gesture. Hearing her say it now, so softly, felt incredibly intimate. I turned to look at her. Her face was only inches from mine. The dim light from my desk lamp caught in her dark eyes, turning them into pools of liquid gold. The question I had seen in them before was back, but this time it was clearer, more urgent. And I knew, with a certainty that silenced all the warring voices in my head, that I had to answer it. I leaned in, closing the last few inches between us, and pressed my lips to hers. Her lips were softer than I could have imagined. The kiss was hesitant at first, a question asked and answered in the same breath. Then she sighed, a soft sound that vibrated against my mouth, and her hand came up to cup my jaw, her thumb stroking my cheek. The kiss deepened, and all the tension, all the fear, all the desperate yearning of the past few months poured into it. It wasn't just a physical act, it was a confession. It was, "I see you, and I feel it too, and please don't let this be a mistake." Her other arm wrapped around my waist, pulling me closer until there was no space left between us at all. I tangled my fingers in her soft, dark hair, my fortress finally, completely, joyfully surrendered. We were no longer two separate people sharing a room. We were just us, a single entity in the quiet darkness, rewriting the ending to a story I thought I already knew. The morning light filtering through the blinds found us tangled together in my narrow twin bed. For a long, panicked moment when I first woke up, I thought I had dreamed it. But then I felt the weight of her arm draped over my waist, the soft puff of her breath against my neck, and the reality of it settled over me, warm and wonderful. We hadn't talked much after the kiss. There had been more kisses, slow and deep and full of discovery, and then a quiet, sleepy journey to my bed. Words felt inadequate, too clumsy for the delicate, new thing that had bloomed between us in the dark. Now, in the light of day, the anxiety began to creep back in. What was this? What did it mean? Maya stirred beside me, her eyelashes fluttering against my shoulder. She opened her eyes and looked at me, a slow, sleepy smile spreading across her face. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi," I whispered back. All my anxieties seemed to melt away under the simple, unadulterated warmth of her gaze. Just then, my phone buzzed on the nightstand, a harsh, unwelcome intrusion. It was my sister. Of course it was. I ignored it, but it buzzed again, insistent. With a sigh, I reached for it. "What, Jen?" I answered, my voice still thick with sleep. "Well, good morning to you too, sunshine," she chirped. "I was just calling to follow up. You hung up on me last night. I just want to make sure you're not spiraling. Maybe we can set you up with my friend Mark's brother. He's a nice guy, an accountant." "Jen, stop," I sat up, pulling the blanket around me. Maya watched me, her expression curious. "I don't want to be set up with an accountant. I don't want to be set up with anyone. I'm fine. I'm more than fine. You don't have to be defensive, Chloe. I'm just trying to help." "I know," I said, and for the first time, I felt a surge of strength, a clarity I hadn't possessed before. "But I don't need that kind of help. I need you to trust me. I'm figuring things out on my own." I looked at Maya, who gave me a small, encouraging nod. "I have to go," I ended the call, and put the phone face down. I took a deep breath, feeling like I'd just passed some crucial test. I had made a choice. I had defended our space. I turned back to Maya. "Sorry about that." "Don't be," she said, echoing her words from the night before. She reached out and tucked a stray piece of hair behind my ear, her touch gentle. "Is that what you were upset about last night?" I nodded. "Partly. That and other stuff." "Sarah?" she asked softly. The name didn't hurt as much as I expected it to. "Yeah. Her too." She didn't press for details. She just nodded, her eyes full of understanding. "We don't have to have it all figured out right now," she said. "We can just be this. For now." This, it was a beautiful word. It was the warmth of her skin, the shared quiet of the morning, the feeling of hope unfurling in my chest. It was enough. It was everything. The masking tape was still on the floor, but it looked different now. It was no longer a border, a dividing line between two separate worlds. It was just a silly piece of tape, a funny scar from the beginning of our story. Later that day, while Maya was in class, I knelt down and peeled it up, the adhesive making a satisfying ripping sound as it came away from the linoleum. I rolled it into a sticky ball and threw it in the trash. When Maya came back, she noticed immediately. She stopped in the doorway, a small smile playing on her lips. She looked at the uninterrupted floor, then at me. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. She just walked in, dropped her bag on her bed, and crossed the space that was no longer hers or mine, but ours. She wrapped her arms around me from behind, resting her chin on my shoulder as I looked out the window. The room felt bigger now, full of possibility. My fortress hadn't been breached, its doors had simply been opened from the inside. I had spent so long bracing for another ending, I had almost forgotten how to recognize a beginning. Have you ever been so afraid of being hurt again that you nearly missed out on the one person who could help you heal? Like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments if you've ever had to unlearn fear to let love in.